She laughed and said, "You're cute when you're jealous," after I caught her ex leaving our apartment. I said, "Thanks." Then I showed her just how cute I could be. The next week, she wasn't laughing anymore after discovering what I did. I, 31M, never thought I'd be the type of person to plan revenge. But there I was, standing in our apartment hallway at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, watching my girlfriend's ex-boyfriend slip out of our front door like some kind of guilty teenager. The worst part wasn't catching him there. The worst part was what happened next. She appeared in the doorway wearing nothing but my old college t-shirt, her hair messy in that particular way that only happens after certain activities. When she saw me standing there with my mouth open, holding groceries I'd bought to surprise her with lunch, she didn't look embarrassed. She didn't look guilty. She looked amused. I asked her what he was doing there, my voice barely containing the rage building in my chest. She shrugged and told me they were just talking about old times. When I pointed out that talking didn't usually require her to be half-naked, she actually had the audacity to laugh. That's when she said it, that I was cute when I was jealous. I stood there for a moment, processing those words. 3 years together. 3 years of building what I thought was something real. 3 years of planning a future that apparently meant nothing to her. I looked at her smug face and simply said thanks. That response seemed to catch her off guard. She'd expected yelling, drama, maybe even tears. Instead, I walked past her into the kitchen, put away the groceries I'd bought, and started making myself a sandwich like nothing had happened. She followed me, suddenly nervous, asking if I was okay. I told her I was fine and asked if she wanted lunch. The confusion on her face was almost worth the pain in my chest. Almost. Over the next few days, I maintained this eerily calm demeanor. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for me to explode or confront her properly. But I didn't. Instead, I started planning. Because if she thought jealous me was cute, she was about to discover just how cute methodical me could be. First, I needed information. I'd always been good with technology. It's what I did for a living, and she'd never been particularly careful with her digital footprint. Her laptop password was our anniversary date, which felt particularly ironic given the circumstances. I found their text conversations going back months. Not just casual catching up. Full-blown emotional affair territory, complete with plans to meet up whenever I was out of town for work. But the real goldmine was her email. Apparently, she'd been complaining about me to her friends for months. According to her messages, I was boring, predictable, and sexually inadequate. She'd even joked about how easy it would be to hide things from me because I was too trusting to ever suspect anything. Reading those words felt like being punched in the stomach repeatedly, but they also crystallized my resolve. She wanted to play games? Fine. I'd show her what games looked like. The plan started simple. I created a fake social media profile, using photos of a model I found online, someone handsome enough to catch attention, but not so perfect as to seem obviously fake. I spent hours crafting the perfect personality. Successful, charming, recently moved to our city. Then I started following her friends on various platforms. Within a week, I'd struck up conversations with 3 of them. These were the same friends who'd been encouraging her affair, calling me names behind my back, and helping her cover her tracks. They had no idea they were flirting with their friend's supposedly clueless boyfriend. But I wasn't done there. I reached out to her ex's current girlfriend. Yes, he had one, which made everything even more disgusting. I didn't reveal who I was initially. Instead, I posed as someone who'd seen them together and thought she should know. I sent her carefully time-stamped photos I'd taken during my next surveillance session, showing him entering and leaving our apartment. The reaction was swift and nuclear. Apparently, his girlfriend had anger management issues and connections to some very unpleasant people. Within 48 hours, his car had been keyed, his apartment building's lobby had been vandalized with accusations about his character, and his workplace had received several anonymous tips about his unprofessional conduct. Meanwhile, at home, my girlfriend still had no idea what was coming. I continued acting normal, even affectionate. I brought her flowers, cooked her favorite meals, and listened sympathetically when she complained about work stress. She seemed relieved that I'd apparently moved past the whole incident with her ex, even commenting to her friends over text about how naive and forgiving I was. That's when I implemented phase 2. I discovered that she'd been using our shared credit card to pay for hotel rooms during her lunch break rendezvous. Hundreds of dollars over several months that I'd somehow missed in our monthly budget reviews. I started documenting everything, building a comprehensive file of her deception. But documentation wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel the same humiliation I'd felt standing in that hallway. So I started playing the long game with her social circle. The fake profile I'd created began dating one of her friends. Let's call her the redhead. The redhead was particularly vindictive and had been the most vocal about encouraging my girlfriend's affair. Through careful manipulation and charm, I convinced the redhead to meet up with my fictional alter ego. When she showed up to the coffee shop for their first date, she found me instead. I explained calmly who I was and showed her screenshots of her own messages encouraging my girlfriend's infidelity. I told her I had similar screenshots of conversations with her other friends and that I was planning to share them with their respective boyfriends and husbands unless she did exactly what I asked. What I asked was simple. I wanted her to throw a party. A big one, with all their mutual friends invited. I wanted my girlfriend there, comfortable and unsuspecting. And I wanted her ex there too, despite the current drama with his actual girlfriend. The redhead tried to refuse, but I showed her more screenshots, including some particularly damaging ones where she'd made some very unflattering comments about her own boyfriend's performance in bed and his financial situation. She agreed to help. The party was set for the following Saturday. My girlfriend was excited about it, mentioning how nice it would be to see everyone together. She even suggested I might want to skip it if I felt uncomfortable around her ex, which confirmed that she knew he'd be there. I told her I wouldn't miss it for the world. Saturday arrived, and the party was in full swing by the time we got there. The redhead had done exactly as I'd asked, ensuring that all the key players were present. My girlfriend's ex was there with a new girl. Apparently, his previous girlfriend had dumped him after the anonymous tips about his character had cost him his job. About an hour into the party, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I connected to the redhead's Wi-Fi and uploaded a carefully prepared presentation to the smart TV in her living room. Then I returned to the party and waited. At exactly 9 p.m., as planned, the redhead announced that she had something fun to show everyone. She turned on the TV, claiming she'd found some hilarious old photos to share. Instead, what appeared on screen was a detailed timeline of my girlfriend's affair, complete with text message screenshots, credit card statements showing hotel charges, and photos I'd taken of her ex leaving our apartment. The room went dead silent except for the sound of my girlfriend gasping. But I wasn't finished. The presentation continued with screenshots of her friends' messages encouraging the affair and mocking me. Each friend's face appeared on screen next to their most damaging comments. The redhead looked like she was going to be sick as her own messages appeared, including the ones where she'd talked about seducing someone else's boyfriend just for fun. But the final slide was the masterpiece. It showed a group chat I discovered where several of them had been planning to humiliate me publicly at this very party, thinking I was completely oblivious to what was happening. They'd planned to have her ex show up with photos of their hotel encounters, thinking it would be hilarious to watch me break down. As the presentation ended, I stood up and addressed the room. I thanked everyone for coming and explained that I'd wanted to share this information publicly since so many of them had been involved in hiding the truth from me. I mentioned that I'd already forwarded copies of everything to the various boyfriends and husbands who weren't present, along with documentation of who specifically had been encouraging their partner's deceptive behavior. My girlfriend finally found her voice and started screaming at me, calling me a psychopath and demanding to know how I'd gotten access to their private messages. I reminded her that she'd given me access to her laptop months ago when hers was being repaired, and that she'd never changed her passwords. Then I delivered the final blow. I told her I'd already moved out of our apartment that morning while she was at the salon. All my belongings were gone. The lease was transferred entirely to her name, and I'd canceled my contribution to rent and utilities effective immediately. Since she'd been so confident about her ability to afford our lifestyle without my help, according to her messages to friends, I figured she wouldn't mind proving it. The ex tried to step in at this point, apparently thinking he could play hero. I turned to him and thanked him for helping me realize what kind of person my girlfriend really was. Then I mentioned that his new girl might want to know about his habit of cheating, since I had photos of him leaving our apartment from just 3 days ago, well after his previous girlfriend had dumped him. The chaos that erupted was everything I'd hoped for and more. Friends turned on each other as the reality of their exposed messages sank in. Relationships imploded in real time as people realized how their trust had been betrayed. My girlfriend found herself completely isolated, with even her closest allies wanting nothing to do with her. I walked out of that party and drove to my new apartment across town. My phone exploded with messages, some angry, some apologetic, some threatening. I blocked every number associated with that entire social circle and changed my own number the next day. Update 1. The fallout was more extensive than I'd anticipated. Within 48 hours, my girlfriend had been calling my work, showing up at my gym, and even contacting my family trying to reach me. She claimed I'd ruined her life over a simple mistake and that my reaction was completely disproportionate. My sister called to tell me that my girlfriend had shown up at her house crying, claiming I'd had some kind of mental breakdown and that she was worried about my well-being. When my sister asked for details, my girlfriend's story fell apart quickly. She couldn't explain why she'd been having an affair or why she thought public humiliation was an appropriate response to being caught. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. The redhead reached out through a mutual acquaintance who wasn't involved in any of the drama. She wanted to apologize and explain that she'd been genuinely shocked by the extent of the messages I'd shown her. She admitted that she'd always known my girlfriend was selfish, but seeing it all laid out like that had made her realize how toxic their entire friend group had become. She also told me something I hadn't known. My girlfriend had been planning to break up with me anyway. She'd been waiting until after her ex left his previous relationship so they could go public without looking like homewreckers. The whole thing about me being boring and predictable hadn't just been venting. It had been her justification for what she was planning to do. That information should have made me feel vindicated, but instead it just made me sad. 3 years of my life had been spent with someone who'd been planning her exit strategy for months, maybe longer. Update 2. 2 weeks after the party, I ran into my girlfriend's ex at a coffee shop. He approached me cautiously, probably expecting some kind of confrontation. Instead, he sat down and told me something that changed my entire perspective on the situation. He explained that my girlfriend had been the one pursuing him, not the other way around. She'd reached out months ago, claiming she was unhappy and that I was emotionally unavailable. She'd painted herself as trapped in a relationship with someone who didn't appreciate her. He believed her story and felt like he was helping her escape a bad situation. When he found out the truth, that I was actually a decent guy who'd been completely committed to her, he tried to end things. That's when she'd become manipulative, threatening to tell his girlfriend that he'd been the one pursuing her. She'd essentially been blackmailing him into continuing the affair. The day I'd caught him leaving our apartment, he'd actually been there to end things definitively. He'd told her he was done and that she needed to either commit to me or break up with me honestly. Her response had been to seduce him one last time and then laugh about how clueless I was. Learning this didn't excuse his behavior, but it did explain a lot. It also made me realize that my girlfriend was far more manipulative than I'd ever suspected. She hadn't just been cheating. She'd been orchestrating the entire situation for her own entertainment. Update 3. A month after everything imploded, I heard through my sister that my girlfriend had been trying to rebuild her social circle by telling people that I'd been abusive and controlling throughout our relationship. She claimed that everything she'd done had been in response to my psychological manipulation and that my revenge had been proof of my dangerous tendencies. At first, this worried me. I'd never been anything but supportive during our relationship, but false accusations can be devastating regardless of their truth. However, her strategy backfired spectacularly. The problem with her new narrative was that too many people had seen the actual evidence of her behavior. The text messages I'd exposed weren't just about the affair. They showed her real personality, her casual cruelty, her enjoyment of other people's pain, her manipulation of everyone around her. Several people who'd known us as a couple came forward to support me, including some I'd never expected. They shared stories of how she'd treated service workers, how she'd talked about friends behind their backs, and how she'd often made cutting remarks about me in public that they'd found uncomfortable. My ex-girlfriend's attempt to play victim had instead reminded everyone why they'd distanced themselves from her in the first place. The final piece of closure came when I received a message from her ex's previous girlfriend, the one with anger management issues. She wanted to thank me for exposing the truth about her ex's character and to tell me that she'd found a much better relationship since leaving him. She also mentioned that my ex-girlfriend had reached out to her, apparently hoping to bond over their shared experience of being wronged by their respective partners. The conversation had not gone well. When my ex-girlfriend had tried to paint herself as a victim, The other woman had pointed out that cheating was a choice, not a response to circumstances. Looking back, I realized that my revenge wasn't really about punishing my girlfriend for cheating. It was about exposing the truth of who she really was, not just to others, but to myself. For 3 years, I'd been in love with someone who didn't exist. The person I'd been planning a future with was a carefully constructed facade designed to hide someone fundamentally selfish and cruel. The woman who laughed when I caught her ex leaving our apartment, who called me cute when I was jealous, who planned to humiliate me for her own entertainment. That was who she really was. My revenge hadn't changed her into something worse. It had simply revealed what had always been there. Was what I did extreme? Probably. Was it justified? That's not for me to decide. But for the first time in months, I wasn't the one being played for a fool. And sometimes, that's all the victory you need. As I settled into my new life, I realized that the best revenge hadn't been the public humiliation or the exposed secrets. It had been walking away with my dignity intact and my eyes finally opened to the truth. She thought I was cute when I was jealous. Turns out, I was even better when I was free.